Let's talk about autistic meltdowns. Before we get started, yes, I am a doctor. Yes, I am autistic. And yes, I spent way too much time trying to figure out how to make this concept understandable, hopefully. This is a visual representation of an autistic person or neurodivergent person's capacity to function. I call it the bucket of woe. Anything that drains a neurodivergent person's energy goes in the bucket of woe. Loud noises, traffic, bad smell, a little bit hungry, dehydrated, forgot to take meds, feel gross because I haven't showered in 3 days, forgot what I was just gonna say. Some things like stimming, quiet time, sleeping, etc. remove woes from the bucket. Slept. Sat and played games on my phone, which is a form of stimming for me. Maybe I sat and I sang a bunch, which is another form of stimming for me. So that's a good thing, because as the bucket fills up, it's more likely that someone will have a meltdown. So, when there's a bunch in there, and it's filled up, like any small thing can cause a meltdown. And this is not something that we have control over at all. The less rest time that we have, the more we start with the next day. That's right, your woes roll over into the next day and they stay there until we are able to recuperate. Additionally, the bucket of woe sits on a shelf. The thing is, this shelf is only supposed to hold about this much weight. So when you have an autistic person who is chronically overwhelmed, the shelf starts to weaken until eventually it breaks. That's autistic burnout. But wait, Blue, I'm not autistic and I get overwhelmed sometimes. This happens to everybody. You're just making this up. First of all, if you can relate that heavily, you might want to look into it just a little bit. Maybe you might have some kind of neurodivergence going on. Second, of course this happens to everybody. We all get overwhelmed. We all get burnt out. Thing is, neurotypicals have a much higher capacity to operate under stress. Why? They get a bigger bucket. Additionally, the list of woes for autistic people is much longer than for neurotypical people. Even amongst fellow neurodivergent people, there's variation because it is, of course, a spectrum. So whereas I might find the construction noise outside to be a little bothersome, for someone else that might be super distracting. Whereas a neurotypical person, if they're even aware that there's construction outside, is unbothered by it because they can just ignore it. So nothing gets added to their bucket. What about the shelf? Well, neurotypical bucket sits on a whole ass desk. So, even though this desk is able to hold probably about this much weight, still a lot more than what an autistic person's shelf can hold. So while it may look similar when neurodivergent people and neurotypical people get overwhelmed and burnt out, the truth is neurotypical people have a huge advantage. This is not an exaggeration. And that's why you see neurodivergent people just struggling to keep up. So if you find yourself feeling doubtful or judgy when it comes to neurodivergent people's accommodations, how they're not able to perform at the same level as neurotypicals, but just that thought in the back of your head was like, oh, I get overwhelmed sometimes too, just get over it. Stop it. We can't. We have no control over the size of our bucket. We literally cannot get over it. We don't have the same operating capacity as neurotypicals. Not to mention, the world is full of neurodivergent woes, just whacking us up constantly. So yeah, I hope this helped kind of shed some light on why neurodivergent people have such a hard time functioning in a neurotypical world. Hi friend. So I actually got a lot of comments like this where people weren't really comfortable with the comparison that neurotypical people have a bigger bucket, whereas neurodivergent people have a smaller bucket. I honestly, I appreciate it. So like nobody come after this person or the number of other comments that talk about it, because I think it's valid. I think it's a valid concern, and I think it's a valid criticism of that video. The fact that I said neurotypicals have a bigger bucket and neurodivergents have a smaller bucket, I wasn't meaning to disparage the autistic community for being less than, or for having, less capability in general, because honestly, that's what the neurotypical community does to us. They really infantilize us, and that certainly wasn't my intent, but I can see how it came off that way, and I really humbly apologize for that. And I have an update to the bucket analogy. So we've got our friend the bucket, and maybe neurotypicals don't have a bigger bucket. Maybe our buckets are the same size. Maybe what actually is going on is that neurotypicals have a better cover for their bucket, where, maybe some woes can get in, but like others can't. Several people said that example, and I wholeheartedly embrace it. It's not that we are less than, it's that our nervous system is set up in a way that allows more input. So I like this update personally. I think it's a great way to demonstrate like what's going on when we do things like ask for accommodations. And that's why it's important that we have those accommodations, because our nervous system is set up in a way that a neurotypical nervous system is not. I'm running out of room on this video, but yeah, anyway, bye.